This is Douglas Montagna from Grand Valley State, and we're here with Don Bennett, who's going to tell us about his experiences in World War II. Start off by asking, if Don, if you could tell us a little bit about what you were doing before the war, a little bit about your childhood, what your folks did, things like that.
Well, I was born in the Upper Peninsula, Michigan, little town of Hulbert, on a silver. My folks had a silver fox ranch at the time, and of course, when the Big Depression came along, that went astray. I went through high school in Sheboygan, Michigan, and that's where I met my wife. We were high school sweethearts, and we got married while I was still in the service after we came home for overhaul. And from there, I graduated from high school in 1942, and I did start Albion College, and but I got out fairly early. My 18th birthday came along in January, and back then you got your greetings from the president on your birthday, and so it was very shortly along about May. I'm in the Navy, and I trained at boot camp at Great Lakes, and then we did diesel school on Navy Pier, Chicago. That was interesting. And from there, they put up on the bulletin board, they were going to take 50, I don't remember the exact number, but so many for submarine school. And I didn't know anything about a submarine. But I was running around with a couple of guys, three of us, other guys, in fact. And they said, let's sign up for it. We'll all stick together. So we did. And of course, guess what? I'm the only one that got it. And they gave me the off the train. And I went to New London, Connecticut, and went through submarine school. I never looked back after that. After I got going into submarines and so on, there was nothing else. That was the thing for me. And after getting out of submarine school, in fact, I met I met a guy called Jim Vandermoor, who you'll be interviewing next week, and he and I have been friends ever since. And we went after submarine school. We went to the West Coast. They sent me down went to Mare Island. They sent me to Hunters Point, San Francisco. And the Sunfish was back from having made 6 war patrols, was back for an overhaul, and I was assigned to the Sunfish. And Jim, he went overseas on a freighter to Australia and did some pretty good duty there, and then picked up his submarine out of Australia. And so for a short time, we were on our way to Pearl, and before you know it, we're all of a sudden the war is there. It came up. You keep saying, "Oh, well, it's a long ways away," but all of a sudden it's there, and we started our first of my 5 war patrols.
Okay, just to back up a little bit, were you following world events as the crisis of World War II was brewing? Like, were you aware of Nazi aggression in Europe, Japanese aggression in the Pacific? Did you have a sense that back in the late 30s, before Pearl Harbor, that war was imminent?
Oh yeah, I think it was, yeah. There was what was going on in England, and the way Hitler was Poland and Czechoslovakia and all of those places as they fell, and Mussolini too. And yes, we were, and of course, and England, being in it before we were actually. So yes, I think everybody, the whole country was pretty well aware of it.
Do you remember where you were and what you were doing when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Well, it was on a Sunday morning. Yeah, I was at home, and we heard it on the radio. And it was the first I heard about it, and I said, oh, you know, and so on. And, but you know, I was a senior in high school at the time, playing basketball and so on. And we knew, you know, it was going to be trouble. I remember our chemistry teacher saying, you boys are going to be in this. And he was right.
Mm-hmm. And what did you want to study at Albion College?
Well, it was a mistake. I started out, I thought, well, I was pretty dirt poor. I borrowed money to even go that first year, and I was just thinking of being an engineer. You know, I had to have something that was stable and I could do well in. The only trouble is I didn't know anything. When all the math and everything came, it was a little tough for me that early, because I was still young. I was still only 17 years old, and so that didn't go too well. I guess actually with being drafted and so on, kind of saved me from having to say I flunked. But I did go back after the war and finished up and graduated from Albion.
Good for you. So you were enrolled at Albion when you were drafted.
Yes.
And were you were expecting to be drafted? Were you?
Oh yeah, yeah, we knew it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And no college deferments back then.
There were a few, but I wasn't among them. Again, my grades didn't call for it. However, when I went back and I was more mature, I had pretty good grades.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good. Yeah, good for you. That's typical of a lot of college students.
Yeah.
They do better when they get a little bit older. And talk a little bit about basic training. What was that like?
Well, boot camp. Well, you're assigned to a company, and you it was drill. We did a lot of exercises and things like that, and marching and ordering, you know, following orders and things like that. And I remember we were there at that time. Basic training went for 8 weeks. We call it boot camp, and they did. You went in the pool for things like that. You have a service week. One of the weeks was a service week where your company did like food, handling the food, mess kit and stuff like that. I got out of that pretty good, because when I was at Albion, I had got my senior life saving, so I got pool duty down there, and we'd have guys, you know, you run them through the pool and make them jump in whether they could swim or not, and they learned to swim. And we hauled a lot of them out, but a lot of guys out, but most of them learned to swim. We learned to bob, things like that weekend. So I got out pretty easy on the service week, but the rest was pretty much just basic marching and following orders and learning orienting you, really.
Did you find it especially hard or traumatic for you, or something that you handled fairly easily?
No. What do you mean, the basic training?
Yeah.
No, no. I had been away from home,
Okay.
because I was at school, and that helped a lot, because I do remember it was tough when I first went to school, and being alone, leaving home, and so on. But I'd pretty much gotten over that.
And then after basic training, what next? Where did they send you then?
Well, then I went to Navy Pier.
Mm-hmm.
It was to a diesel school, and then we tore diesels apart and learned everything about diesel engines. And most of those fellows were going to be sent to landing craft. So in fact, that was basically probably the main reason we signed up for submarine duty, because we knew we'd probably be heading for landing craft. otherwise. But, and that lasted, wasn't too long a school. I think it was something like, again, another about 2 months, so on. And then from there, I went to submarine school.
You volunteered for submarine school, or did they select you?
It's the only way you went, yeah.
Okay.
All submariners are volunteer.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, for the four of us signed up, volunteered together, we're gonna stick together. Yeah, they put it up and you sign up for it. And
Do you remember what it was about the prospect of serving on a submarine that made you want to do it? I mean, why did you want to be on the submarine?
like I say, till I got there, I'm not sure I did. In fact, I had some I had some thoughts about what have I done. But once I got into them and started studying them and so on, it was a different story. And then, man, and if I was ever to go back, I want to be right on a submarine.
Okay. And then when you went at submarine school, was that, I've heard that they put you through a lot of tests there?
Yeah. Yeah, they before they go too far with you, they give you, of course, physical is very important. Things like even your bite, how it's just so in case you had to use the mumps and lung and so on, and your physical and even psychological. They haul us in there and ask us silly questions like, "Do you like girls?" Things like that. But we before we actually went into submarine school, we went into what they call Spritz's Navy. You probably heard about Spritz.
Yeah.
He was a dandy, and most of us were scared to death of him when we first went there. And during this period is when they did all of that testing on us, and then we'd go down to the diving tower. We'd have to come up from. We were required to come up from 50 feet. They take us down in a pressure tank and let us out. We go up a rope. With every 10 feet, there's a bobbers. You stop, you count, then you go 10 feet more, and then you could volunteer to go the 100 feet if you want. And it was a 100-foot tank.
No, you holding your breath the whole time?
Oh no, we were wearing the mumps and lung.
Oh, okay.
That's why that bite I told you about earlier. Yeah, the mumps and lung, the escape lung.
Mm-hmm.
And although the guys watching us and diving down there didn't, they were amazing down there, diving down that deep with nothing on, watching us. But we and you could volunteer to go the 100 feet if you want. Of course I did, and I did. But I remember one bobber when I was just getting started, when it was going around, you go with your hands, you go up around your rope, and then your feet, the same way. I'm kind of locked on the rope and so on. But when I was going around that bobber, it got away from me, and my feet went up in the air like that because of the pressure and so on. And I had quite a time battling my way back down, but I got it and got on my way back up properly.
I bet. Did most people, I guess you, for lack of a better term, flunk out of submarine school?
There was a high, there was a high loss there. A lot of it, even if you just screwed up on anything, any little thing, boom, Pier 92, New York. Where they went, they ended up being in the armed guard on these freighters, and so you have to be very careful. You didn't screw, and also, of course, same way with your marks and your getting along and all of that. You were watched pretty close. But once you got into sub school and got that far, the attrition wasn't as bad as it was early. In the early part, the attrition was pretty bad. We were saying goodbye to guys all the time.
So there must have been a real sense of, I guess, pride in being able to survive something, to make it through something like that.
Yeah. It didn't take us long to realize, thinking we were pretty special. By God, we were.
Oh, yeah. So, certainly sounds it.
Eh,
And then, about how long was this so-called Spritz's Navy, the submarine school?
Well, actually, you're in it while you're waiting to get into the sub school. And because they had, so I imagine it would vary a little, because sometimes they could move them a little faster than others and so on. But it seems to me I was in Spritz's, and you had to be in there so long to, like I say, get these preliminary things done and out of the way. And seems to me I was in not over 2 to 4 weeks, something like that.
Would you get a promotion when you got out of there? Like if you graduated from
Well,
submarine school?
yeah, you start out, you're like seaman, just a plain seaman. And then, of course, I was a fireman because I was in diesels in so on. And we went from to fireman second class. And then after we got out of submarine school, we went to a diesel school, submarine diesel school, right there in New London where we were. And that lasted, another 3 or 4 or 5 weeks. I forget, but then when you got out of there, I was, by the time I went on the Sunfish, they shipped me, I was a fireman first class. And then, of course, after a patrol or two, what you do in a submarine, then of course you get qualified. As soon as you get qualified, which is very important to a submariner, and the only way you can do it is on a patrol. No, that's my comp. Yeah, no, this is the one. Yeah, that shows you're qualified in submarines, and you during that patrol, you're studying all the time, and then the executive officer takes you through the boat and asks you a lot of questions and so on. You got to know it. We pride ourselves in everybody knowing everybody's job on a submarine. It was to an extent, anyway, and so there's a lot had to be known. Well, as soon as you did that and you made your first patrol, boom, I was third class. So then I made a couple more patrols and I'm second class. and I was about to become first class when I got out. So promotions went fairly fast.
Was it like really crossing a threshold when you were first in combat, where you were first in a situation where the enemy might actually be trying to shoot at you? Was that like a major threshold, or did it just something that just happened?
Well, yeah, it's scary. There's just no way you got. You get depth charge, and there's so many things that can on a submarine that in wartime that can happen. Of course, there's depth charge. We were depth charged. We had gunnery shot at us. There's mines. Just operating one of those things the way we do in wartime there's a real element of danger. Yeah, usually, but training. You train to do your job. You train. And so that you kind of do that automatic when you're in the action, and the fear and the thinking about it really comes a little later afterwards. And it's dangerous. When I think of all of the times, and you go through, well, you mentioned that first patrol. Okay, we sank, I think, 4 ships, big battle surface. We had 13, we sank. That was real foggy. We had an advantage. It was foggy. They didn't come into view until about 50 to 100 yards, and we were ready for them. And they were, like you call sampans and hauling inter-island supplies. One was a troller. They had some guns, light gunnery on them, so on, but we had to jump on them, and so it was, the only damage we incurred, there was one bullet right through, hole through our periscope shears, and they shot down an antenna that was running back, and that's the only damage it does to us. We sank all of the others. And another one time on that first patrol, we were off Kamchatka, Peninsula of Kamchatka, Russia, and this patrol was in the Kurile Islands north, and we were being there into the, I guess they call it the Oshkosh Sea or whatever, and we in broad day, one morning, broad daylight, we were right on their beach, and there was these, I think there was like 3 ships at anchor there, and of course during wartime, or back then, the 3 mile, it was a 3 mile limit. It was, I think now it's 12 miles, and we went in on right on the surface and sent up IFF, what's it, identification friend or foe, and two of them ran up Russian flags and started getting underway. This one ran up a Jap flag and sat there. Of course, Japan and Russia were neutral with each other and trading with each other at the time, and so we go. It was 48 feet of water. I remember that. We go in there at about 1,200 yards and fire one torpedo. Went underneath it. We move into 1,000 yards, fire another one, missed it again. Move into 800 yards and reset the torpedo and fired it. Boom! He flew up and went down. Mast was still sticking out of the water. Now, at that time, that's my first patrol, and at that time, we were still having a lot of torpedo trouble, and that in itself was quite interesting, and also sad. But there was 2 or 3 things wrong with our torpedoes, and of course, ordnance said no, it's the skippers. Some of our skippers took a blame when they never should have on it. But if you hit a target square on, made a perfect shot, the darn thing may not explode. You had a better chance if you hit it on an angle. So our magnetic exploder was not working right. The other thing, as I told you, our torpedo went on the depth. The torpedoes wouldn't run at the depth they were set, so they'd run deep, so on, and so it made it awfully hard. You go in, you risk yourself, and take a beating, depth charge it and everything, and you do a job and get it, and then your darn torpedoes don't work. It gets a little discouraging.
Ideally, what's the range on it? Do you know the range on those torpedoes? About how close did you have to be?
Well, they usually varied, and generally we tried to set up, a lot of times to fire 2,000, I think 3,000 yards, you're probably maximum. But within 2,000 yards, depending on your setup, of course, a lot of times you had to shoot what you had, but most of the time we try and get in around 1,200 yards, if we could. It made a nice shot.
When you went out on patrol, how many torpedoes would you have on the sub with you?
24.
Okay.
We had 10 tubes, 6 forward and 4 aft. Now, of course, they were loaded. That's 10. And then we had 4 more torpedoes in the after torpedo room. So that's 14. So we had 10 more torpedoes in the forward torpedo room. We carried 24.
And you would be out on patrol for about 5 or 6 weeks?
If you get rid of your torpedoes, you come back. Uh, it varied, but yeah, I think my longest patrol was 54, 55 days.
Okay.
The shortest was less than 30.
Was there pressure to conserve the torpedoes, or they didn't? You know, like if you have targets,
Well,
fire away.
or they didn't want us to waste them, but on the other hand, uh, yeah, if we were on a patrol, particularly, especially when they started getting down, and there was still a lot of targets out there, the skippers themselves would kind of ration them, to where they're what they wanted. Of course, the idea was to get as much damage with what you had, and so it was kind of self-explanatory of how you did it. Oh, we made some mistakes. I remember, in fact, in there, that thing I gave you, I think it shows once where we shot. Oh, we thought we had a huge target up there. Turned out it was a trawler trailing a light way back behind it. And I don't know how many. We went in twice and fired a bunch of torpedoes at it. But it was just a mistake. But
You have the same captain for all your patrols, or did that
all but
position
one
turn
of them,
over?
yeah, Captain Shelby. Yeah, he went on a sunfish one patrol before I got on it. He made 5 on it, same as I did, but he got off the last patrol. We had a new skipper, but we had a well-seasoned executive officer who I liked very much. In fact, our the Sunfish's 10th, which would have been my 4th patrol, we were up in the Yellow Sea, where cold, in the middle of the winter and cold and awful cold. We were right along their beaches, and our first, this was the only patrol I had that was considered unsuccessful. We didn't sink anything. And our first target we were going after, and there was ice. We were in a 7-mile current, and there was a lot of ice floes and stuff floating along. And the first time we come up scope on it and hooked right into a big ice floe. I wonder how, if that ship was looking, noticing all these ice floes floating along, and this one staying steady. But it hooked in, and this same executive officer who I was talking to him about one of our national conventions later, we were talking about that patrol. Well, it went up and it kind of hooked in. We couldn't get the dumb thing out. And with our power and so on, and he says, he said, and guess what? Guess who ordered the second scope up? He did. And that hooked in too. So we had 2 periscopes hooked into the ice floes, and we're using our power in and up, trying to loosen them up and get them out. Plus we flooded down as much as we to make the boat as heavy as we could. So on, but we were stuck in those things for over 2 hours before we got free. Of course, our periscopes were ruined then, and so they made us come back.
How far can you see with those periscopes? I mean, how good are the eyes of those subs?
Well, they did pretty good with them. I looked through them a few times, and so on. I didn't think that much about them, but I imagine if you're used to it and so on. But the thing is, of course, is how rough is it, and things like that. And I did have 2 patrols, which I'm very proud of. That I was on battle station submerged. I was on the stern planes, which is there's bow planes and stern planes, and to help. And of course, if it's rough and so on, and the skipper, if you weren't on the ball, if he got dipped or so on, he was making an approach, he let you know about it, and so on. Which, but you could actually see pretty good, and I don't know whether they were. I know when we sank ships, they'd let us go up and look and see sometimes. or see what we did, and it was they got along with it pretty good.
Any
Although I'm
radar
sure-
on board or anything like that?
Pardon?
Any radar on board the subs?
Yes, we did have, yeah. It was kind of radar, kind of, it was on, and sometimes it'd be perfect, and sometimes it didn't work so good. But I'm glad you brought up radar. I would say that was the one biggest advantage we had over. I think it was the most important advantage that we had over the Japanese as far as our submarines were concerned. We could pick them up and follow them and so on. And a lot of times, we'd track a convoy or a ship for a day or 2 days, and they'd get by, and we'd surface and swing out around them and go get ahead of them again and dive again and wait for them again. Once we tracked their zigzag pattern, so on.
Do you know why? I've always wondered this, is why the zigzag, to avoid submarines. I always heard that the ships should go in a zigzag pattern.
Yeah.
That just makes it a lot harder to track.
Yeah, to begin with, it takes time to track it.
Mm-hmm.
If he's running straight down line, you can set up and boom.
Mm-hmm.
But he's zigzagging, you get all set up to fire, and he zigs.
Mm-hmm.
Or zags, and you got to redo it, the whole thing. So it was, yes, zigzagging made a lot of sense, both sides.
Okay. And most of the ships could go faster than the subs.
Not on the surface, and there again, the radar, and that's why we actually sank more ships at night than we did in the day, because we had that element of speed. But yes, men of war, yes. If we were trying to go after a destroyer or a carrier, we chased a carrier. Destroyers chased us,
Mm-hmm.
and but yeah, they were faster. But your merchant ship, we were faster than them, because we could get up to 20 to 22 knots on the surface at night.
On any of the patrols, or which of the patrols were you in the most danger from, destroyers, depth charges, airplanes, and things like that?
All of them.
All of them, okay.
No, except the 10th.
Okay.
We had, well, no. Actually, yeah, there were some that were worse than others.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of jumbled together this many years later.
Mm-hmm.
But we made 3 patrols in a row in that East China and Yellow Sea area, one right after the other. And I remember the farthest south we were was about Shanghai, and the farthest north we went was way up in the Yellow Sea. Of course, the Yellow Sea was kind of shallow,
Mm-hmm.
and you get dip charged in there, and you get some dandy ones, because they know the depth and how deep it is, and that's about where you are.
Mm-hmm.
So it made it a little easier for them and tougher for us in shallow water.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say all told, probably had close to 1,000 depth charges over the whole time,
Wow.
but maybe 75 of them. Once you get used to them,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 75 of them were scary.
Mm-hmm.
A great many of them were, they weren't on us that close and so on. But the times they were, I know, well, they got close enough they'd knock holes in our decking, sprung our forward torpedo room hatch.
Mm-hmm.
We had double hatches on, bolted up. They learned that, and at the beginning of the war they didn't have, but evidently they learned that from, and so all it flooded was the escape hatch and so on, that particular time. But that's getting some depth charges pretty darn close.
And the sub would rattle and shake if it was relatively close.
Yeah, and the water'd rush through the
Mm-hmm.
thing, and it would rock you, and the lights would flash, and valves would come loose and things like that. And, well, breaks, some breakage, and, a little bit, but the close ones were scary. You just boom, the whole thing, you know, goes. I remember once we were just standing at ease. I happened to be in the mess hall for some reason, and they had a big the silverware, all of it in this big thing sitting up. We had the table, and then up above they had a rack or another thing, and this big silverware thing sit there, and it was heavy, really heavy, and this they came along. This destroyer came along, picked us right up along our stern, and you could hear those screws just as plain as day. His screws, as he went right up along our whole ship, and he's dropping depth charges. I think it was a pattern of 7, and oh, they were close. They were really scary, and I remember that silverware jumping. I grabbed it and put my head down on it, and tried to hold it down, but that big heavy tray was just jumping.
Were you confident all along that the United States was going to win the war?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I don't think we ever really doubted that too much. I think that the thing that got to me the most was you go out on these patrols, and like I remember back, I said, what was action? I said, all of them. You go out and you do that the first time, you say, boy, get out of that, son. And then you go right back out. You're out the first time, well, that was just one of those things. It won't be like that anymore. And it's over again. And then again, you go. And all of a sudden you start saying, hey, this is only a matter of time. And you start becoming a little fatalistic, really. Hey, this can't go on forever.
Yeah, it's almost like an odds game, like a Russian roulette or something.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder. I remember saying to myself, if I could live to be 50, I'm 19 and 20, you know, on this one. If I could ever live to be 50, I'll sign a deal right now. And if I could get out of this and live to be 50, I'll make a deal. So it was scary, and not only just yourself. You know, we were doing a lot of damage to other people too, and yeah, you know, there's the thrill of winning. You got them, they didn't get you. But then afterwards, you know, you killed. You know, a lot of people died, so on, and they were probably just as innocent as us, and it bothered you.
And did the sailors, did you guys talk a lot with each other about these things, or not?
We
you
did
didn't.
We did not. No. No. These are things that I think each guy went through in his own mind. Same way with when the submarine went down. I mean, you know, the type of death. You know, you think about it. The guys go down in those iron coffins, and that's the end of it. You never hear or see anything about them again. And we all knew we could end up that way. And not only that, it wasn't a matter of you being lucky and getting away. You're all in the same boat. You know, you're pretty much all going to get it. And hey, you think about it.
Oh, sure. What was life like on these patrols in between the times of combat when you're going after ships or you're being attacked?
Oh, it was. And it was amazing how you get back to normal routine right afterwards. Soon afterwards, just, within a day, you're back to your normal routine. 8 on, 4, or 4 off, 4 on, 8 off, and so on, and you're back and doing the same thing, and boom, until another contact comes up, so on. And there's just, I know there's so many other things that just happen. There's always something that keeps you going, but the routine, you go back into it just real quick, and then of course the crowdiness and so on, but we got used to it, and we're pretty comfortable, really, overall, once you get into your routine of how you do things.
Where would you sleep? What would your bed like, or where you slept?
I was issued in the after torpedo room a bed right in the lower, and the hatch to the maneuvering room, where that's right there, and my bunk was right here on the lower, the torpedo right here, and my bunk there, and the hatch to the maneuvering room right there. And I was issued that, and I could have moved up as I be seniority into the crew's mess and so on, but I never did. I kept that bunk all the time I was on the Sunfish. And the reason I did was because if anything happened, it'd come down through the maneuvering room right now. And you're right there, you're on top of it, you knew what was going on most of the time.
Was that near your battle station, your bunk? Was your bunk near your battle station?
No, it was not. No. My battle station, of course, was like I said, I had battle stations submerged. Two runs I had on the stern planes, but my battle station was in the engine room, which was the after engine room. My first patrol I oiled in the after engine room, and then I was in the forward engine room for the rest of the time. And my last 2 patrols, I'd been moved up to be throttleman. In other words, my shift, when I was in charge of the forward engine room.
What was up, like showering or bathing, or did you?
What was that again?
Could you take showers? Did you take baths?
Once a week.
What were the facilities like?
Yeah. Well, the way you did it is, and you conserved water. By the way, I made the fresh water back with these Kleinschmidt, what do you call them? Anyway, they're like a still. But anyway, which we made the fresh water in, and but what you do is you go in, you wet down, shut off the water, you soak down, and then you turn the water on and you rinse off, and you get out. Now, in the end, there could be occasions when you're in some dirty work, you'd be allowed to take an extra shower, but we didn't have much of that anyway. But making the water, and of course it had to be pretty good for the batteries. You see, if you make a batch of it, and the electrician, he'd come along and he'd test it, he'd say not good enough. Well, you put that into the water we drank and bathed and used, and we make another batch. It had to be up to a certain point after his test with silver nitrate or something. I forget what he used, and it was good enough and then we give it to him for the batteries.
Was there a shortage of drinking water? Was that rationed, or you could drink?
No, we never had. We were able to make enough to get by on, all right enough.
And what was the food like?
Oh, the food was great. The only trouble is, the cooks and the food and so on was I don't know how they did it, but they put out some real nice deals. The only trouble was, for me, and back then I was a skinny little thing, and things have changed. But back then, the refrigerant, it seems that North Neon 12 or whatever it was, Freon.
Freon, yeah.
Yeah, that would get into some of the food, so on, and leave a taste, and that killed me. Killed the taste of stuff for me, but the actual food was great, and the baker I did the baker. You make that fresh bread and rolls and stuff. I ate a lot of that.
And you guys would be able to watch movies, play cards, listen to music, a little bit of that?
Yeah, a little bit, but really not much. We didn't, we'd have acey-deucey tournaments, things like that during a patrol. Have newsletters, you know, and all of that, a lot of scuttlebutt and stuff going on, so on. But otherwise, it was pretty much, you know, they get in the mess hall and shoot the breeze. But otherwise, it was, you know, you said 8 on and 4 or 4 on and 8 off, but that don't count all the time you go on your training. It don't count all the time you're at battle stations. So it's over. So which in some of those patrols was quite a little. You know, you get off watch. You go to battle stations. You're on battle stations for eight hours, so on. You get off battle stations, you're due back on watch. So they're your time. You put in a week's work.
You didn't get bored.
No. You took your sack time when you had a chance.
And how did the guys get along very well? I've always heard that they did.
They did. Yeah, they really did. You had to. It's, and also if you didn't, you'd be off the boat. Now, which was, you see, on a submarine, they're designed that what you do is you make 4 patrols and off. Skippers, everybody. That was a normal idea. Four runs and off. But it didn't work out that way because, again, skippers got guys they like and so on, or the exec officers, guys that they like and that they really got along with. They kept them, right? I had a couple of friends on the Sunfish that made 9 runs in a row on her, and I had made 5 and was about to go on my 6th when the war ended. And so it didn't all work out that way. I have a friend made, a couple of guys I know made 11, 12 war patrols. My God.
Wow.
Pete Lober, a friend of mine, he was a Mustang too. He went up. He made 11 war patrols on 2 boats that were both in the top 10.
Wow.
And, so man, he loved it. It didn't bother him a bit. Some people it bothered more than others. We had guys that wanted to get off too.
What about the sense of, were you surprised that the war ended when it did? Because from what I understand is, people thought that the United States would have to invade Japan, and it might go on for years.
It was very important to me. We had just come back. Of course, I'd been home, got married, so on, and we just got back to Pearl. They painted our decks yellow. They ripped out the chief's quarters, put in all kinds of radar and radio equipment, so on. Now they'd gone through Okinawa by now, and they were getting ready for the invasion of Japan. We were supposed to go, and the problem was so much air flight going back and forth, and the kamikazes. We were supposed to go and lay between the fleet and proper on the surface with our yellow deck, and planes were supposed to identify with us so that the fleet could kind of sort it out, who was who was a man, if they had kamikazes coming in or if it was ours. and so on. And I dearly did not want to do that.
Mhm.
I, I, I was really concerned.
That was your next patrol, if you will.
Yeah,
Okay.
if I'd have gone on my
Yeah.
sixth patrol, that's what we were supposed to do.
Mhm.
We were all set to take off.
Mhm.
We'd come back from the States and we were at Pearl and having this stuff done to take off for the invasion of Japan. And that was supposed to be our duty, to lay on the surface as much as possible.
Mhm.
You know, we didn't have to stay up there and get killed. We could dive,
Mhm.
you know, if we were in trouble, so on. But the main idea was to stay up and for identification so that they could identify.
The kamikazes coming. And,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Mhm.
That's what, because they had so much trouble with that when they did Okinawa.
Yeah. Mhm. And then, once the war ends, what happens next? Were you immediately discharged? Did you stay in the service for a while?
Well, yeah, we did pretty good. We were at Pearl,
Mhm.
and of course there was a big party that day, and we were September 2nd. We were back in the States.
Mhm.
They sent us back. Seven of our boats came back together, and so they just we most of the guys hung around until you know, for you know, longer, you know, well into the 46 before they got out.
Mhm.
And of course now we tied up, and then we started what they call mothballing the submarine. And by now I had my wife come back out to the West Coast with us, and we're mothballing it, put her around. When we say mothballing it, we put these cocoons around guns and all working stuff and so on, and then put it into reserve. And guys were getting out pretty fast and so on, and the skipper, I remember I was due to get out really in maybe late October or early November, and the skipper called three of us in, and first thing he let us know that he had the authority to keep us 90 days, which we knew that. So on. He says, you guys are married, you got your wives here. He says, the guys are getting out so fast, I'm short-handed on people I need to get the ship all done. And he said, I want you to volunteer to stay. I guarantee to get you home for Christmas. So, you know, he had us anyway. So we all agreed, the three of us agreed, and our wives were there, and it wasn't bad. And so we did stay and so on, and then they didn't decommission, but they put it in, they had the final party for the sub on the 26th of December. I got out the 18th of December. I got out on the West Coast in Camp Shoemaker, California. And my wife and I, we took the train. They had it all set up for us. Train reservations and so on were impossible to get. But they had it all set up for us, and we got on board and headed for Michigan. By then my folks were living in Niles, Michigan. And I remember we get in Chicago, LaSalle Station, to change trains. And by now, of course, my wife is pregnant, but just barely. Not much. What do they say? You're just a little bit pregnant. Anyway, and I'm worried about her. And that station was wall to wall people getting trains. I had two bags. One was up here and one was down here, and her, and so on. We're trying to make a train from Chicago to Niles, But anyway, I got home for Christmas.
Was there any part of you that wanted to make a career out of the Navy, or had you had enough?
I thought about it. Yes, I did. I did think about it, and I still think about it. But yeah, how it would have been, so on. But I think the decision with family and now I've got family and so on and coming on, and by the way, we ended up having 6 children.
Congratulations.
My daughter is 1 daughter and 5 sons. And we've been married 63 years.
Congratulations.
And so the decision was coming. I kind of had it in the back of my head. I wanted to get back to college. So I used up the GI Bill. I stayed in. I got 2 masters, 4 and several minors.
You went back to Albion?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good for you.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Eventually. Didn't get in right away, but we did, and I graduated, I think it was about like 51.
And you studied engineering?
Heck no. I got a degree in business administration.
Okay.
And also a education. So I got two of those. I had minors in, psychology, phys ed, speech, and one other one. Oh, political science.
You know a lot about a lot of things.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit. Now, the gentleman we talked to last week said that after the war, it was typical to not talk about it to anybody. In fact, you were told not to talk about it. Was that your experience?
Well, we just didn't. And see, everybody, you know, when you stop and think about it, everybody was involved in World War II then, and so on. And so everybody had experiences and so on and things. And we were raising a family, trying to make a living and getting going. And it was, now in my case, it was 1974 before I heard about the Subvets Inc. And I never talked about it at all.
You ever told your kids to talk to your kids about it?
Not that much.
Okay.
No. But when they started the Submarine Veterans World War II, and which was a great thing, we started getting it done. Then again, and I think that was pretty much true for most of the guys. And then later on, then we started realizing, gee, you know, this was something. Well, we realized it. We knew it before, but just that you were just tied up in making a living.
Did you keep in touch with a lot of the your fellow submariners?
Oh yeah, yeah, we have. Like I told you, Jim Vandermoor and I have been friends, best of friends, for years and years.
But you would never talk about the war or your experiences. What would you talk about with each other?
I didn't get back with him until 1974.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Till I read you. We were good friends in the Navy, but then I didn't hear a thing about him again until I joined the Subvets, World War II, and we met back up again and so on, and then ever since we've been great friends.
Okay, and overall, it's been a very good experience. The submarine veterans group, you've really enjoyed that.
No question about it.
Okay.
There's a feeling there. You see, we depended on each other so much, and the faith and trust. Hey, a submariner can tell me something, and that's gold. It's automatic.
Okay, we're down to 2 minutes in the hour. Is there any last thing you want to say that we haven't touched on?
Gee, I've talked too much already. I think we pretty much. You did a good job. You got me talking.
Okay, well, thank you very much. You had a lot to say, and people will be enjoying this for who knows how long.
Well, good.
That was terrific.